It's 5:05 and welcome into a Tuesday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. We are tracking some details out of the General Assembly. It was a busy week last week ahead of the crossover deadline. That's where the North Carolina Senate passed the Farmers Protection Act. We talked about this legislation back probably about 6 weeks or so ago in a 36-11 vote. The bill, sponsored by Senators Buck Newton out of Wilson, Lisa Barnes out of Nash, is a companion bill to House Bill 62. The bill reads as follows. It is unlawful for a bank to deny or cancel its service to an agriculture producer based in whole or in part upon the agriculture producer's greenhouse gas emissions, use of fossil fuel-derived fertilizers, or the use of fossil fuel-powered machinery. Senator Newton explained on the Senate floor that the bill prohibits financial institutions from discriminating against farmers who use fossil fuels or fertilizers based from fossil fuels. According to Newton, the banks need to be neutral, and he knows of no outright opposition to the legislation. However, 11 votes did come against that bill. While Senate Bill 554 does not explicitly mention environmental social governance (ESG) practices, which have risen to prominence over the last couple of years, the protection for farmers are broadly similar. ESG is explicitly mentioned in the House version, which is House Bill 62. Kelly Lester, the policy analyst for the Center for Food, Power, and Life at the John Locke Foundation, told the Carolina Journal that House Bill 554 is a necessary safeguard against growing trends of ESG-driven discrimination that unfairly targets agricultural producers. She said, quote, farmers are being penalized for not breaking the law, but for using lawful and effective practices like fossil fuel-powered equipment and fertilizer. Denying them access to basic banking services over these choices is not only unjust, it threatens our food supply and rural economies. This bill ensures that North Carolina farmers are treated fairly and protected from ideological financial gatekeeping. ESG practices promote environmental sustainability and purport societal and governmental benefits, but climate regulations also drive these practices. Experts have indicated that ESG frameworks frequently preserve investors and financial institutions to avoid financially backing high-carbon projects such as livestock farming. Capital is diverted away from these farms, especially cattle farms, as ESG activists on the left target such farms due to their methane emissions. But farmers cannot modernize their operations, adopt sustainable practices, or expand their businesses without having access to sufficient capital. ESG investing directs capital towards high-scoring companies and projects that meet specific environmental, social, and governance criteria. And according to experts, these criteria encourage businesses to adopt environmentally sustained practices, such as promoting diversity and enhancing governance structures. After passing the Senate last week, the bill was sent by special message to the House and was referred to the House Rules Committee, so that legislation did successfully make it through crossover, meaning that it passed one chamber and was sent to the other. ESG has been a major discussion over the last couple of years. We've seen some legislation as it relates to ESG in North Carolina. This morning, again, keeping our eye on it as it relates to the farming infrastructure. You can read some additional details on the legislation. It's not a super long bill, just about a page and a half, over on our website this morning at carolinajournal.com, where it's now 5:09, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We've had a lot of stories over the last couple of months about State Auditor Dave Boliek. He took that office back at earlier parts of 2025. He is, of course, the state auditor, also now in charge of the State Board of Elections due to some legislation changing last year. Our very own Teresa Opeka from CarolinaJournal.com had the opportunity to chat with him exclusively last week. She joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Teresa, a position that many folks really didn't pay a lot of attention to in state government has gotten a lot of attention in the last couple of months. Walk us through some of your conversation with the new state auditor.
Sure. Good morning, Nick. Thanks for having me. So yeah, even Auditor Boliek didn't expect this when he was running for the office last year. So he's now overseeing the appointments for North Carolina State Board of Elections, which we all know changed over last week. We had some new appointments. Some people that he appointed on the Republican side was Francis DeLuca and Robert Anthony Russo. And he also put back some returning members, Stacey Four Eggers IV, along with Democratic members Siobhan Millen and Jeff Carmen. So, yeah, and this was all decided by a bill back in December that became law, Senate Bill 382, that allows the state auditor to make the new election board appointments and assume administrative oversight of the board. Traditionally, it has been under the governor, which, former Governor Cooper argued about, and now Governor Josh Stein argued about as well. There's been a few court cases going back and forth. It was eventually settled, 2 weeks ago, and here we are. So, yeah, they did have a good chat with Auditor Boliek last week.
Now, we bring up, of course, the State Board of Elections. This was one of the things that he discussed during his campaign because there was discussion in the legislature that things could be happening with the State Board of Elections. And Teresa, even if it wasn't that legislation didn't go forward and he didn't take control, auditing the State Board of Elections was one of his major campaign talking points as well. So not only does he have audit authority over it, but some of these additional authorities as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So in addition to appointing, he also has to do the administrative work, and he says his office is perfect for that because they're doing all accounting all the time. He has hired Chief Financial Officer Sarah Dozier, who was with the Centennial Authority. So she's got a tremendous amount of experience, and they have to come up to see what's needed for the board from a budget standpoint by July 1st. The General Assembly also tasked them with that. So it's not just appointments. It's also this administrative, the budgeting, and there's lots to go through with that as well.
What did he tell you specifically, things maybe that he looks to change or things that he really wants to maybe uncover or dive deeper into as it relates to the State Board of Elections?
Yeah, so basically he said, and it's not a party issue. He said it basically looks, voters, anybody who votes in North Carolina should be concerned about what the former management of the Board of Elections did or did not do. Like he brought up the Griffin Riggs case, which we've been hearing about nonstop, and finally that has come to a solution. He said, there were tens of thousands of voter entries on the voter rolls that were not complete. To him, he said it's mismanagement, or that's management 101. That they were not, the former Board of Elections wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing. They're not running elections, and if they're not maintaining accurate voter files. So the fact that the Board of Elections and management have nothing to say about it, and the entries aren't complete, and they haven't taken any action thus far on completing the voter roll entries, he is very concerned about that. So that's one of the things he was talking about, hopefully taking action on that.
Teresa, as we kind of look forward with this, you have spent a lot of time covering the Council of State. I can only presume, and I know this is looking forward many years, but going forward, I can imagine that this state auditor's position is probably going to be a highly sought after post with some of these changes and maybe some of the different things that State Auditor Dave Boliek is doing compared to some of his predecessors.
Oh, absolutely. I would agree with you. I mean, he's taking the bulls by the horns, so taking the bull by the horn, so to speak. There's so many things he's looking at. Like that discussion I had with him, we talked about the DMV audit that's coming up shortly, going to be released. There's so many different things that his office is working on. Seems like he's more energized, as maybe more than his predecessors were, about getting different things done. And as far as talking about you talk about the Council of State, as far as like the court case that initially decided that maybe Governor Josh Stein should have control over State Board of Elections. We had Labor Commissioner Luke Farley disagreeing with that. He spoke up about that at the recent Council of State meeting about, there's a lot of different people in these roles that are a little more, should you say, more vocal and more like an Energizer bunny type thing. They're getting things done. I think they have a different mindset when it comes to these offices. It's actually for the best when you take a look at that, because it's all, you're working for the taxpayer, you're working for voters here in North Carolina about what's fair and what's right.
Yeah, these individuals, Teresa, go through running a statewide election, which is a very physically and economically draining event that takes place across the state of North Carolina. They get elected into these positions, and many of them, as you just noted, with Commissioner Farley and, of course, State Auditor Dave Boliek, they're off to the races with that. You've got a lot more quotes in this sit-down interview that you had with the state auditor. Where can folks read that this morning?
Sure, they can head on over to carolinajournal.com.
Teresa Opeka joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's now 5:16, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get a look at the roadways on your Tuesday morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick.
It's 522. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. We've got an update this morning on some story you may have heard about over the last couple of months. A piece of software known as PowerSchool, which is used across the state of North Carolina, had a major cyber breach earlier this year. It has caused some big-time problems, and according to new details out of the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, that's DPI, they confirmed last week that the state's PowerSchool student information system was targeted by a cyber extortion campaign. The breach reportedly happened back in January, but last week, perpetrators of the cyber attack contacted staff members at DPI demanding Bitcoin payments in exchange for removing the information. The perpetrators say DPI should pay in Bitcoin to prevent the release of sensitive data tied to thousands of students and staff members across the North Carolina public school system, including charter schools. The data at risk includes names, contact information, social security numbers, birth dates, medical notes, parental guardian details, a lot of very important and pertinent information there. In a press conference last week, DPI Superintendent Mo Green said the department does not appear to be involved in a new breach, rather a new attempt to extort funds from hacking the same data set that was compromised in a January cyber attack. The original breach was confirmed to have occurred within the contractor PowerSchool system, not those of DPI or local school districts. Here's a little bit from the superintendent and Dr. Vanessa Wren with the Department of Public Instruction.
So this morning, threat actors reached out to a number of employees in public schools across the state and the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, sharing that they had obtained North Carolina student and teacher records initially compromised in the PowerSchool student information system cybersecurity incident that was reported in January of this year. In addition, the threat actor attempts to extort North Carolina public schools in the message that was sent. North Carolina Department of Public Instruction has not and certainly will not engage with these threat actors. We are prohibited by law from doing so as well.
We have worked to be as transparent as possible as this data and information has come available to us. What we do know is about 20 of our LEAs did receive an email this morning. And that email was from a threat actor that showed some evidence of having the same data that was breached in January. And so we are working with those schools, and we have also set up a way for schools who receive any other notification to reach out to us as well. And we'll continue to support them through that. Again, I'm going to echo how unfortunate this entire incident has been, but we'll also say that we are very pleased with the review of all of our contracts that hold any sensitive data and how those are being handled by our vendors. We use many software as a service vendors, and we do make sure they meet the state security standards, but we are ongoing reviewing for diligence in this area as well.
So obviously a big-time issue there for the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Forensics and analysis experts behind the scenes say that these cyber attacks such as these are on a rise as technology behind them gets more advanced. Sean McGrader, the CEO of BlockTrace, told the Carolina Journal, quote, "We're seeing a significant uptick in technical sophistication of threat actors exploiting blockchain systems. Ransomware, extortion schemes, and anonymized payments are becoming more challenging to trace. We actively support law enforcement at all levels in pursuing these criminals, especially when their crimes involve the exploitation of children. That's a new low, and we won't hesitate to help bring them to justice," end quote. This attack seems to have been on the PowerSchool system that serves public schools only, although many private schools use it as well. And so far, DPI says that the details on exactly whose information is vulnerable cannot be confirmed. The DPI Chief Information Officer, Dr. Vanessa Wren, who you just heard from, said, quote, "We don't have any students in our system information systems for private schools. This is also impacting charter schools. This was part of a data set that was originally breached. We don't have any evidence of any charter schools receiving an email from the threat actor." DPI reported that 20 North Carolina local education agencies received emails from what they described as a threat actor, along with approximately 50 employees at the State Department of Public Instruction. The messages consisted with those sent to other Power School customers worldwide. This was a national and worldwide breach for Power Schools, including districts in Oregon and as well as Canada as a whole, contained threats to release private data unless those threat actors were paid in Bitcoin. The superintendent noting, quote, "There was nothing that the Department of Public Instruction's school districts or individual schools could have done to prevent these violations." Power School said in a statement that the day that these came in and denied that a second breach occurred, asserting that the current threat involves the same data that came out in that January breach. However, the DPI chief seemed to express frustration that Power School had previously assured clients that compromised data had been destroyed. Dr. Wren said, quote, "It is completely unfortunate that the perpetrators are prying on innocent children and dedicated public servants. We are, and as I mentioned earlier, working closely with law enforcement to try and do everything that we can to make sure that the responsible parties here are held accountable for their actions." The Office of the North Carolina Attorney General in Jeff Jackson has launched an investigation into the January attacks, and on Wednesday of last week, Green said that the AG's office has not yet decided whether to take legal action against Power School. During the press briefing that you just heard a minute of earlier, DPI announced that Power School's contract will expire on July 31st of this year, and all public school units, including charter schools, will transition into Infinite Campus. What they say is a more modern student information system chosen in part for its stronger data security measures. Green told the public, quote, "We are deeply investigated in Infinite Campus's security practices and are pleased with how they are designed. Here in North Carolina, we certainly take protecting educators and student data very seriously. Affected individuals, including current and former students, educators, and their families, are encouraged to sign up for free credit monitoring and identity theft protection, which is currently available through July 31st of this year, although Dr. Wren says that they will be advocating to keep the monitoring available beyond the date. With the breach, Power School is offering 2 years of free identity protection service to students and educators whose information were involved, plus 2 years of credit monitoring for adults impacted. DPI is urging anyone receiving a message from a threat actor to not engage and instead report the message through DPI's cyber incident form, which with law enforcement reported is currently being handled by DPI. The superintendent noted in this situation, the threat actor communicated directly with schools and the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. They've done this not only with us, but with other end users, if you will. So other districts across the globe have also experienced this as well. We are not alone. This is a major problem being faced now by DPI. There's additional details in our story this morning, including a link on how to sign up for some of that free credit monitoring and identity theft protection being offered by Power School. You can head on over to carolinajournal.com and search for NC schools targeted in Bitcoin extortion scheme over breach. All of those links, all of those details, again, on our website, carolinajournal.com, where it's now 5:31, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Another look at the roadways on your Tuesday morning commute with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. and you're hot.
It's 5:38. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Supreme Court Justice Allison Riggs is expected to be sworn in this morning for an 8-year term on the North Carolina Supreme Court. This, of course, after a 6-month legal battle that went on that wrapped up last week when her 2024 opponent, Jefferson Griffin, did attempt to challenge started at more than 65,000 ballots, looking at those looking to potentially overturn that election. Riggs originally joined the court last year, appointed by Democrat Governor Roy Cooper to replace former Justice Mike Morgan, who unsuccessfully ran for governor to replace Cooper. She then went on to win the 2024 election by just 734 votes out of more than 5.5 million ballots cast in a race that attracted major national attention, being the last election in the entire country to yet to be uncertified from the 2024 election cycle. She'll now rejoin a court where most of her other justices were discussing this major decision over what to do with some of these ballots. It is important to note that she has continued to serve on the court throughout this entire period of time. However, she was not on any of the various discussions and decisions as it related to the legal battle between Jefferson Griffin and herself. Riggs wrote in a post on social media last week, "This is a victory for North Carolina voters and the rule of law. But we must keep fighting to elect judges who will put our Constitution over party and personal ambitions." She again is set to be sworn in coming up here this morning after this 6+ month legal battle between her and Jefferson Griffin. We were bringing you constant updates, not only on our website, carolinajournal.com, but right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Some other major changes also slated for the North Carolina State Board of Elections. We continue to keep an eye on those details as well, and we'll pass them along to you as soon as we get details right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:41. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We have been tracking an ongoing lawsuit between the small town of Carrboro and the major electrical producer and provider Duke Energy. As most recently as just a couple of weeks ago, we learned that Duke Energy had filed a motion to dismiss the case. Mitch Kokai with the John Locke Foundation joins us with some additional details this morning. Mitch, looks like Duke Energy once again filing some motions to dismiss the case. What's the latest that you're learning this morning?
Yes, there is a second motion to dismiss from Duke Energy, and a lot of this deals with the technicalities of the court system. But you might remember that back in March, the major utility filed its first motion to dismiss, and just recently, and your listeners will remember this, Carrboro, the town of Carrboro, responded, saying that Duke got its legal arguments wrong and that this suit should be allowed to go forward. Now, shortly after Carrboro responded to that first motion to dismiss, Duke Energy has now filed a second motion to dismiss. The first one basically argued that the North Carolina Business Court that's overseeing this case didn't have what's called subject matter jurisdiction, meaning the court shouldn't even be dealing with this claim. This time around, what Duke Energy is arguing is that Carrboro has failed to state a claim for which a court can grant relief. These are under the rules of civil procedure. They're called Rule 12B motions, and they have little subsections that are different. But basically, this is a second way to try to skin the cat. If for some reason the business court judge decides that the lawsuit survives that first motion to dismiss, perhaps he'll see that the second grounds for the motion to dismiss is one that would be more appropriate. And basically, the general argument from Duke Energy is that Carrboro is taking the utility to court trying to blame Duke Energy for climate change or for its policies in addressing the climate and creating expenses for the people of Carrboro that wouldn't be there otherwise. And the response from Duke Energy is that no, there's no way for this town to come forward and say that Duke Energy is responsible for any of the bills that the town of Carrboro has to pay, that this is not an appropriate forum. Basically what they're trying to do, meaning the town of Carrboro and the people that they're working with, namely an activist group called NC Warn, is they're trying to get a change in policy that is not something that you would use the court system to try to do.
Well, Mitch, and without getting into the extensive legal details of all of this, what you bring up on its face value sounds like Duke Energy is saying, hey, yes, we're a large company, we're a large producer, we're a large provider of electricity, but you can't really pin climate change if we want to go down that path. You can't necessarily blame it directly on us, especially in the business courts. Is that my understanding? Is that accurate?
Yes, that's definitely along the right lines. Basically, what Duke Energy is saying is that Carrboro is trying to make some major changes in the way that not only Duke Energy, but also the governments, the federal government, state governments approach the climate issue, and that this is not the proper forum to get that done. Suing Duke Energy, saying that it is misleading the public about what's happening with the climate, and because of its actions is causing Carrboro to incur a number of expenses. Because basically at root, what Carrboro is asking for is for the courts to make Duke Energy pay the town for expenses the town is incurring because of what Duke Energy has done in terms of climate change. And the general argument from Duke Energy is that this is not the proper forum. What Carrboro and NC Warn are asking for is a change in policy at the government level, not a change in what Duke Energy is doing, and not a proper response to what Duke Energy is doing in terms of its response to the climate.
Mitch, can you explain, you mentioned that this was in business court. Can you explain how that might differ from maybe some of the other recent legal things we've talked about, Jefferson Griffin, State Board of Elections, Insurance Commission, and utility? What's the difference between the business court and some of these other courtrooms?
The business court is a specialized court that's within the Superior Court or major trial court level in North Carolina. This suit was originally filed in Orange County Superior Court, which is just the general trial court level in Carrboro's county, which you might suspect is a little bit left of center from some of the other superior courts across North Carolina. But Duke Energy, shortly after the suit was filed, had it removed to North Carolina Business Court because that is a specialized court that deals with business issues. And the sense was, this is something that's definitely a business issue. It's not just the run-of-the-mill civil suit dealing with defamation or the intentional infliction of emotional distress or something like that. This is a business issue, and from the vantage point of Duke Energy, needs to be resolved by a business court. That's why it's in front of a business court judge.
Obviously, we're talking about a relatively small township going after, in the case, Duke Energy, but there could be some much wider ramifications of this. We'll continue to keep an eye on those details. Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:47, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Another look at traffic this morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick.
Good morning again. It's 5:53. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. In a recent exclusive interview with CarolinaJournal.com, North Carolina State Auditor Dave Boliek shared his thoughts on his appointments to the North Carolina State Board of Elections, including why he felt the change was needed and why others should feel the same regardless of which party they belong to. Just a little backstory here. A provision in Senate Bill 382, which became law in December of last year, allows the state auditor to make new election board appointments and assume administrative oversight of the board. It has traditionally been under the governor. The law required the state auditor to appoint members from a list of nominees provided by the state party chairs of the two major political parties. That, of course, would be the Republican and Democrat Party. Now, back on April the 30th, the North Carolina Court of Appeals blocked a lower court ruling favoring Democrat Governor Josh Stein in his legal battle with state legislative leaders and Boliek over those appointments. That paved the way for the state auditor to name his new choices, with those new members being sworn in back on May the 7th. When asked of the new board chair in Francis DeLuca, who is a retired colonel with the U.S. Marines, Dave Boliek said he is not only has a tremendous amount of experience and knowledge with respect to elections, but also organized leadership and has spent more than 17 years as the president of the Civitas Institute. The state auditor said, quote, "He is someone that understands state government and has a real keen mind with respect to what's going on at the Board of Elections. This is someone who understands what's going on in the state of North Carolina and doesn't need to get up to speed. He already understands elections and understands what the goals are." Boliek commented on some of his other colleagues in there as well, saying, quote, "He has a tremendous amount of experience and knowledge in the area of election and election law." This is speaking of the new executive director, Sam Hayes, noting he has worked across several state agencies, including spending time at the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality and with the state treasurer. That includes his current position with the General Assembly. So he certainly understands how state government works and has a lot of respect for people on both sides of the aisle for his competence and his ability to solve problems. So I think it's a fantastic hire. As was the story last week, Sam Hayes replaces Karen Brinson Bell, who served as the executive director since 2019. State Auditor Dave Boliek, again, now taking control of the election board. There's been some discussion over whether he has that authority or not. Boliek saying, quote, "Even in our governor's own argument, there are many states across the country where the Secretary of State, for example, has election authority. So I'm curious if the General Assembly had delegated the State Board of Elections to the Secretary of State, who is currently Democrat Elaine Marshall, would the governor's office have had the same argument?" He said that while he has a very good and productive working relationship with Stein on many issues so far, he does continue to disagree with his legal team's analysis with respect to the Council of State as an independent members. To him, it makes sense to have the NCSBE under the state auditor's purview, with the state auditor noting, "At a high level, you're counting votes. Who's better to assure things are counted correctly than the state auditor's office?" More on this exclusive interview with Teresa Opeka and State Auditor Dave Boliek on our website, CarolinaJournal.com. That's going to do it for a Tuesday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We'll be back with you tomorrow morning, 5 to 6, right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.